Okay, I'm going to get started by just welcoming all of you guys. Welcome back. Nice to see all of you guys this morning. Welcome to anyone who's joining us online. We're going to start with meditation like we do each morning. And then this morning, I'm going to be sharing with you what is Kamma and how does it affect me. This is the natural law that you've been learning about and gaining wisdom about through things like the Eightfold Path and the 5 precepts and things like this. But now we're going to go in and talk about it specifically. I'm going to explain to you how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma so that you can get to a point where you're only experiencing wholesome Kamma. We're going to take our mid-morning break. Then we're going to be learning about what is merit and continued support on the path to enlightenment. We're going to take our lunch break. And then when we come back, I'm going to teach you how to integrate the teachings into your day-to-day life. We'll talk about the field trip that's happening tomorrow. And we'll have a little activity that I'll share with you guys this afternoon as well. So if you guys would like to join for meditation, you're more than welcome to take seated, lying, standing. You guys know walking meditation now, so you can even do walking meditation. It's really up to you. I'm going to do the chanting to ease us into the meditation, but then I'm going to leave you on your own to do meditation yourself, where you don't need guidance from me, but we'll just start with the chanting, and then you're going to hear me end with the chanting. And you know to focus your mind on the breath, and anytime the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off, let it go, and bring the mind back to the breath. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakavato Savaka Sangho Sanghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakawa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vichacharanang Sammuno Sakato Rokavitu Anuttaro Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanam Bhutto Bhagavati. อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะกวาพุทธังภะคะวันหังอภิวาเทมิสวากขาโตภะคะวะตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนภะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามิ นะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะขะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังพุทโธภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. So I mentioned at the beginning of the course that I was going to gradually build you guys up to a 30-minute meditation. This is a 30-minute meditation. So you guys kind of have like an idea of how long it is. So if this felt like, wow, this was a real stretch for you, great. You know, this is helpful for you to really kind of stretch that and get to that 30-minute mark. If this was like, wow, that was so short, like, hey, you know, you're at a 30-minute meditation. Or if you're like, no, this was just right, right? So there you go. You're at a 30-minute meditation. So you'd like to gradually build this up. Now, if you're meditating 2 to 3 times a day, each day of the month. Now, let's just say 2 times a day. That would be 60 meditations in a month. Well, if you have, say, 52, 53, 54 meditations, you'll be fine. You'll make your way to enlightenment. If you miss a meditation here or there, it's not going to mess up you getting to enlightenment. You're going to miss a meditation every now and again, especially as you're building up your practice. So I encourage you not to put pressure or force yourself to feel guilty or shameful if you've missed a meditation or something like this. This is going to happen. Your enlightenment isn't going to be determined based on whether you miss meditation today or not. What's going to determine whether you get to enlightenment is if you miss your meditation today, what do you do next? Do you allow that to become not only one day that you've missed meditation, but 2 or 3 or 4, or 1 or 2 or 3 weeks, or 1 or 2 or 3 months? So if you can consistently meditate 2 to 3 times a day over the course of several years, That's what's going to determine whether you get to enlightenment or not. So you're going to miss meditations here and there. So don't worry about those kinds of things. You aim for 2 to 3 sessions per day and just realize you're going to miss some here and there. But if you're getting in 52, 53, 54 meditations in a month, you're making your way to enlightenment. No worries about that. So this is what you would like to build up to, about a 30-minute meditation session each session, and then 2 or 3 times a day be meditating this amount of time. Okay, so this afternoon when we come back from lunch, there's going to be an open question period where you guys can ask any and all questions that you like about any aspect of the path to enlightenment. But I just thought I'd give you guys a little bit of insight on meditation, since you guys have been now meditating for several days with me as part of the course. What I'm going to do is I'm going to move into this talk about what is Kamma and how does it affect me. This is a natural law that your mind is awakening to. This is what you're doing on the path to enlightenment, is cultivating wisdom about this natural law. When we talk about awakening to enlightenment, it means to cultivate wisdom. And as I've mentioned to you in the past, it's the natural laws of existence that the unenlightened mind doesn't understand, and that's why it struggles and has difficulties. When we were talking yesterday about craving, anger, and ignorance, that ignorance or that unknowing of true reality or confusion or misunderstanding, it's misunderstanding this natural law. The unenlightened mind doesn't have wisdom of this natural law, and that's why it will struggle and have difficulties in the world. This natural law is teaching you the cause and effect about how when you make decisions, there's going to be certain consequences for that. If you're making wise decisions or unwise decisions, there's going to be either wholesome or unwholesome results. Sometimes people resign themselves to thinking that what they experience in life is good luck or bad luck, destiny or fate, or maybe there's a being like God or some entity, some superpower that's controlling what they're experiencing on a day-to-day basis. Or sometimes people blame what they experience on other people. Well, if you come from this type of thinking, you're going to need to be able to see true reality that that's not true, because that's a defeating way to look at the world. Because if those are the things that are causing you to experience certain things in your day-to-day life, you're locked in. You can't change anything about your life, because you can't change good luck or bad luck. You wouldn't be able to change destiny or fate. You wouldn't be able to change any supreme being or some entity that's controlling what's happening in the world. And you can't change other people. But in reality, this isn't what you're experiencing. You're not experiencing any of those things. Those things don't actually exist. What you're experiencing is the results of your decisions. That's what the natural law of Kamma is. So I'm going to teach you about this natural law, helping you to understand it. And ultimately, I'm going to teach you how to extinguish your unwholesome Kamma so that you can experience only wholesome Kamma. So what Kamma is it's a natural law that is existing and functioning at all times, whether you're aware of it or not. It's affecting you at all times, just like the natural law of gravity. We didn't know about the natural law of gravity when we were 1 year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, but it was still affecting us, just like this natural law. Now, this word oftentimes is used karma. You might be more familiar with that. That's from the Sanskrit language, where the Pali language uses the word Kamma. And since people that study the original words of the Buddha will typically be studying in Pali, this word Kamma is the better word to use. But if this translated just one English word, I would use that. But it means the same thing. Whether you're saying karma or Kamma, it's pointing to the same thing, which is this natural law. This natural law isn't anything mystical or magical. It's cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. Whenever you make decisions, either wisely or unwisely, it's going to produce either wholesome Kamma or wholesome results, or unwholesome Kamma or unwholesome results. So it's a natural law that is affecting everyone, whether they're aware of this natural law or not. There's no being or entity that's overseeing this natural law. It's not like there's some supreme being or some entity that's dishing out punishments and rewards or anything like that. That's not what this natural law is about. It's not about punishments and rewards. It's not about who's to blame or who's at fault. You're experiencing the results of your decisions through your intentions, your speech, and your actions. Whenever you're making decisions about your intentions, your speech, and your actions, now that's going to produce certain results. And when you lack wisdom of this natural law, you're going to tend to make unwise decisions. And that's where you'll experience unwholesome results. If you've ever gone into a conversation thinking that you had all the best intentions in the world, and that conversation blew up on you, and you were like, whoa, what just happened? Right? This is because the mind isn't practicing the natural laws. because the mind thought you had all the best intentions, but you weren't understanding right intention from the way the Buddha teaches it. You weren't understanding right speech from the way the Buddha teaches it, or right action the way the Buddha teaches it. So it's when you lack wisdom of this natural law that you'll go out into the world and you'll struggle, and you'll have difficulties in your relationships, in your day-to-day decision making. So this natural law isn't about punishments and rewards. It's not who's to blame or who's at fault. It's essentially a sequence of events that when there's a certain decision that's made, there's going to be a certain result because of that. It's nothing mystical or magical. It's not a dark cloud following you around. I've heard people say all these different kinds of things. I've even heard people talk about the natural law of Kamma like a bank account, that you make deposits into it. And after you make all these deposits, now you can start doing unwholesome things and make withdrawals from it. This isn't actually true. So I'm going to help you to understand this natural law. First, let me just share this summary with you that you've seen this before, that the natural law of Kamma is cause and effect, or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. It's your life, your decisions, and your results. Every single thing you experience in life is because of your decisions. You can, if there's anything that you don't particularly care for about your life, you just cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. If it's any other way, you can't improve your life. There's nothing you can do. You're locked in. But when you start seeing the natural law of Kamma clearly, you can see if there's any particular part of your life that you don't particularly care for, cultivate wisdom, make different decisions, and you will experience different results. Okay, so here's some words from the Buddha to help you guys understand two important points about Kamma as we're getting started to understand the natural law of Kamma. Now, out of this book series of 13 books, there's one book that's dedicated to the natural law of Kamma. But we could really say that the entire book series is the natural law of Kamma, because everything that the Buddha taught in one way or another is coming back to the natural law of Kamma. But here, these are just two important points that you need to understand as you're approaching the natural law of Kamma to understand it. Here's the first one. He says, beings are the owners of their Kamma, the heirs of their Kamma. They have Kamma as their origin, Kamma as their relative, Kamma as their resort. Whatever Kamma they do, wholesome or unwholesome, they are its heirs. What he's saying is nobody can create Kamma for you. It's only you that can create your own Kamma. It's you that's making decisions, and it's you that's experiencing those consequences. So sometimes you might hear somebody say, oh, don't rub your bad Kamma off on me. It's not possible to do that. Or someone might say, let me give you some of my good Kamma. It's not possible to do that. It's your decisions that are leading to any results that you experience. You can't inherit those kinds of things from other people. The result of Kamma, I say, is threefold: to be experienced in this very life, or in the next rebirth, or on some subsequent occasion. Right? I know many of you guys haven't independently verified the cycle of rebirth yet, but that's something that you can ultimately get to by the time you make your way through the path to enlightenment. But what the Buddha is saying here is that you can't run and hide from your Kamma. Any decisions you make, you are going to experience the results of that, either in this life, in the next life, or in some future life. Ultimately, what you're doing is you're extinguishing all your unwholesome Kamma in this life so that you only experience wholesome Kamma, and that's when your mind's actually enlightened, when you're experiencing only wholesome Kamma. But what he's explaining to you here is that you can't run and hide from your Kamma. If you make any decisions that are wise or unwise, you're going to experience the results of that. So if you understand these two statements where he says, okay, you're the one that's creating your Kamma and you can't run and hide from it, then the next thing is, well, let me learn as much about this natural law as I can so that I can understand it and extinguish all my unwholesome Kamma so that I can experience only wholesome Kamma, because that's what you would be experiencing as an enlightened being. You would only be experiencing wholesome Kamma coming back to you. So there's four types of Kamma that you need to understand. There's wholesome Kamma and unwholesome Kamma. There's old Kamma and new Kamma. What wholesome Kamma is any decisions that you're making that are harmless, they are going to produce wholesome Kamma. Those are wise decisions that are harmless, that aren't causing harm to other beings. Any decisions that you make that are harmful towards other beings, this is going to produce unwholesome Kamma, because you're harming other beings, and now this harm is going to come back to you. As you guys have learned through this course, you can't cause someone else to be discontent. You can't cause someone to be angry or frustrated or agitated or annoyed. If they're experiencing any of those discontent feelings that we talk about, it's their own mind that's causing that, just like your mind is causing your own discontent feelings too. But you can cause harm to other beings, where you're harming their material possessions, you're harming their physical body, you're harming their reputation, things of this nature. You can cause harm. And whenever you're causing harm to a living being, this harm is going to come back to you. So you need to make sure that you get to a point where all your decisions are harmless. And I'm going to help you understand how to do that. So these are the two types of kamma here. Is wholesome and unwholesome kamma are produced by harmless decisions or harmful decisions. Then there's something called old kamma and new kamma. What old kamma is any decisions that you made in the past that you're now experiencing the results of in the present moment. And then new kamma is any decisions you're making now in the present moment that you're going to experience the results of in the future. So let me give you an example of this. Let's just say 3 years ago, I was filling out some government forms and I lied on this government form. Maybe it was like a form to report my income so that I could pay taxes. And I lied on it so that I could pay lower taxes. And now 3 years later, I'm getting a notice in the mail that says, hey, we caught this error and you lied on your tax form. And now you owe us $1,000 for the original amount that you owed us. You owe us $1,000 interest and you owe us $1,000 penalty. Please send us $3,000. And this is a notice that you're getting in the mail. This is old kamma. It was from a decision 3 years ago that you're made, and now you're experiencing the results of it in this present moment. But now in the present moment, you have the ability to make new decisions. And any new decisions that you make is going to produce new kamma. Right? So this is old, unwholesome kamma coming back to me, but now in the present moment, I'm about to generate some new kamma. And if you didn't understand these teachings, you might rip up the piece of paper and throw it away. Try to run and hide from it. But if you understand you can't run and hide from this, you know that would be the last thing you'd be interested to do. Or if you didn't know these teachings, you might call up the government or write them a letter and start being nasty and bitter and harsh and hostile with them. And once again, if you know these teachings, that's the last thing you'd be interested in doing, because it's going to produce new, unwholesome kamma. But instead, what you would like to do is produce new, wholesome kamma. So maybe what you choose to do is call up the government or write them a letter and say, hey, I'm so sorry on this oversight. I really apologize. I would like to solve this issue. But I really don't have $3,000. I'm so sorry. What can I do to solve this? And maybe you're being so polite and so kind and friendly with them. They say, hey, you know what? We're going to drop off the interest and the penalty. Just pay us the $1,000 and we're good. And you're like, I'd really like to pay you that $1,000, but I don't even have $1,000. I'm so sorry. And maybe you're being so polite. They say, hey, you know what? Why don't we work out a payment plan? You can pay us $50 a month or $100 a month and we'll be just fine. And now you've created new wholesome kamma, because you're now extinguishing this old unwholesome kamma by making new decisions in the present moment that are wise, based in the Eightfold Path, based in right intention, right speech, and right action, and even right livelihood as well. Right view as well. So you would like to produce new kamma that is wholesome, because you can't go back and change what you did in the past. Any decisions you made in the past, you are going to experience the results of that, whether it's wholesome or unwholesome. You're going to experience that old kamma coming back to you. But now in the present moment, anything that's coming back to you, you can now choose to make wise decisions that is going to produce new wholesome kamma, because you're not interested in producing any more unwholesome kamma. So these are the four types of kamma: wholesome kamma, unwholesome kamma, old kamma, and new kamma. And now some more words from the Buddha about how you produce unwholesome kamma. This is in more detail connected to what we were talking about yesterday. The way that you produce unwholesome kamma is whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, this is producing unwholesome kamma. Because remember that craving is like those selfish desires, that longing, yearning, chasing after the objects of your affection, wanting and expecting things to be a certain way. Whenever you're making decisions in your own selfish desires, it's going to produce unwholesome kamma. And then when you're angry, frustrated, agitated, annoyed, and all of that animosity and bitterness and resentment is arising, whenever you make decisions through that, it's going to produce unwholesome karma. And then when you make decisions through ignorance or the unknowing of true reality, the confusion, the misunderstanding, where you don't understand these natural laws and all the teachings that the Buddha shared, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. And you can independently verify this. You can look at your life, right? Because that's what you're doing with the teachings of the Buddha. You're not believing any of this stuff. You can look at situations where you've made decisions based in craving, anger, or ignorance. You can see that it's produced unwholesome results for you. Maybe you have broken relationships. Maybe people chose to leave out of your life. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe you lost money. Maybe you were trying to hurry up and make a decision, and you were hurry up in making a decision, and you made an unwise decision to purchase something or put a deposit somewhere, and now you lost your money in that situation. Or maybe you've lost a relationship or lost a job or something like this. Or maybe you were hurrying up to maintain your car or something, and you didn't do something really thoroughly or really well, and maybe you got stranded on the street with your car or your bicycle or your motorbike or something like this. So whenever you're making decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to lead to unwholesome results. And what the mind's going to tend to do in the unenlightened state when it has this craving is it's going to want to hurry up and make a bunch of decisions because it's trying to get to those pleasant feelings. So you might notice in certain situations, your mind is trying to hurry up and make a bunch of decisions. And now because you're rushing through your decision-making process, you're basing your decisions in craving, and it's going to produce unwholesome results. So you need to slow your mind down. Don't chase those pleasant feelings. Make thorough, well thought out decisions that's going to lead to wholesome results. Because what produces wholesome karma are the wholesome roots. This is what we talked about yesterday too, that whenever you're making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, this is going to produce wholesome karma for you, or wholesome results, because this is just the opposite of craving, anger, and ignorance. Generosity is the giving and sharing of more than is strictly required in any given situation without any expectation of anything in return, such as your time, effort, energy, or resources. Whenever you're sharing and with other people, if you're doing that from the middle way, it's going to produce wholesome results. If you do it with craving, where you're overextending yourself, it's going to produce unwholesome results. Or if you're on the other side where you're never sharing, that's craving too. The mind's quite selfish. You're going to experience unwholesome results. But when you come to the middle with your generosity and you're frequently sharing with the people around you, this is going to help you to be able to produce wholesome karma. Then when you're making decisions based in loving kindness, this is a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, active goodwill. This is the exact opposite of anger, hatred, ill will, and all those other lesser versions like frustration, agitation, annoyance, and things like that, or dislike. When you're making decisions through loving kindness, where you have this genuine interest in seeing all beings be well, and you have active goodwill towards them, that's going to produce wholesome karma for you. And when you make decisions based in wisdom, wisdom is wisdom of the natural laws, particularly the natural law of Kamma, but also things like the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 5 precepts. All those things are helping you to understand the natural law. So whenever you're making decisions with wisdom, which is going to take time, you're going to need to think through your decisions to make sure you have wisdom. Now when you're making decisions based on wisdom, it's going to produce wholesome karma. So this is how you produce unwholesome karma and wholesome karma. And it's through your mind in the decisions that you're making. And that's why what you're doing on this path is you're gradually bringing down your craving, anger, and ignorance, and you're gradually increasing your generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom, so that more and more you can be making decisions through generosity, loving kindness, and wisdom. Do you guys have any questions on this? Yes, sir. If you could get a microphone. Yeah, we have folks online joining us. And for those of you guys online, if you would like to ask questions, you can put that into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or raise your hand in Zoom and let me know that you have a question.
Yeah, unwholesome karma, you say it carries on to the next life.
If you're reborn. Because if you get to enlightenment, you've extinguished all your unwholesome karma, so there's no unwholesome karma to experience in the next life.
So how do you rectify it? I mean, if you're not aware of it, I mean, from a previous life.
That's what I'm going to show you now.
Oh, okay.
I'm going to show you how to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. Okay, so let's go on then. All right, so now helping you to understand how to eliminate your unwholesome karma. What you're doing to eliminate your unwholesome karma is you're getting up and running on the Eightfold Path. That's why we taught that on Tuesday. I went through that very thoroughly for 2.5 hours, spending time to help you understand the Eightfold Path. And if you haven't learned that yet, it's on our YouTube channel, it's on our podcast, it's in our books, it's many different places that I share. It's in our audio books and all this other kind of stuff. And I teach it all the time. So the Eightfold Path is the complete perfect plan that's going to teach you how to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. It's through learning intellectually, examining and investigating that teaching, then reflecting on it to independently verify whether it's true or false, and then practicing it in your day-to-day life. That's going to extinguish all your unwholesome karma. Because when your unwholesome karma is coming back to you, you need to make wise decisions in the present moment that's going to extinguish this old unwholesome karma. And it's the Eightfold Path that's going to teach you how to do that. So essentially what we've been doing all throughout our life is we've been putting mud in our garden hose, right? If we use this analogy, we've been putting mud on our garden hose with unwise decisions based in craving, anger, and ignorance. And we've been shoving all this mud into our garden hose. And now what you're doing on the path to enlightenment is you're taking that garden hose and you're hooking it up to a faucet, and you're opening up the faucet to get some clean water coming through this garden hose. Well, if you're coming to the temple once every 6 months, if you're meditating once a week or once a month, you've got like a little drip going through this impacted garden hose. You're not going to clean that out in this lifetime. But if you open up that faucet wider and wider and wider, where you're regularly learning from a teacher, you're studying in books, you're meditating daily, things like this, you're actively practicing the teachings, you're going to get more and more water going through that garden hose. Well, this garden hose is going to spit mud for a while, because we put mud in it in the past. So it's going to spit mud for a while. But every once in a while, you're going to get some clean water coming through that garden hose. And then you keep putting clean water into that garden hose, and it's going to spit mud, but then you're going to get clean water. But then it's going to go back to mud. But then eventually it's going to be clean water. And then you're going to get some mud. Right? And then it's going to be clean water. And that's where your mind is now enlightened, because you don't have any mud in this garden hose. You haven't been putting mud into this garden hose, and you've been flushing it out with all this clean water, with all these wise decisions that you're making in terms of learning the teachings, meditating, interacting in your relationships in a better way. This is going to clean out your garden hose. Okay, so I'm going to give you some examples from my life so you can understand how this works. When I was growing up, I grew up in a very hostile and bitter environment. I remember times where, we'd be at a restaurant and my mom didn't get a particular item that she ordered, and she would yell and holler and scream at the workers. And I grew up seeing this, and that's kind of like what I learned growing up. So even though I was polite and respectful to a certain degree, I learned to be bitter and harsh and hostile. And that's the way my mind was conditioned, and that's what I was conforming to. And those were the choices that I was making to be bitter, harsh, and hostile around me. So when I met my wife, of course, when we first meet, we're in the honeymoon phase. You're all nice and kind and polite, but eventually that all wears off. And every once in a while, you're grumpy and irritable and nasty towards your life partner. And I had done this from the time that we had first met all the way through our relationship. But at the 11th year mark of our relationship, I was tired of all this bitterness and harshness and hostility that I had experienced my entire life, and the difficult and turbulent relationships that I had had all throughout my life. So at the 11th year mark, I decided that I was going to change and I was going to do things differently. And I started actively training my mind very closely. And as I started training my mind very closely, I was calm, I was peaceful, I was joyful, I was being polite and respectful to my wife in each interaction that I was having. But she was still bitter. She was still harsh and hostile, because that's the way I was in the past. And now when I would come home, sometimes she would just start yelling at me for no reason at all. Or sometimes we'd be talking and I'd be downstairs or something in the living room, and she'd just come down and start yelling at me for like no reason at all. And this was my old unwholesome karma coming back to me. And in the past, I would yell right back and I would sling the mud right back at her, right? But now I understood, that's unwise, because if I put anger and bitterness and harshness harshness back out there, it's just going to keep coming back to me over and over. So when she was coming at me with this hostility or this bitterness, oftentimes I would just walk away. I would just walk away because my mind, I needed to protect my mind, and I would just walk away. Other times she would come to me and she would talk and she'd be yelling and hollering and all these kinds of stuff. And I would just sit there and I would just listen to what she had to say. And then after she was done, I would say, "Thank you so much." And I would walk away. Right. And then other times when she'd be yelling and hollering, screaming at me, she'd be like, "You're such a bad husband, blah, 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 blah." I'd be like, "Yep, I sure was. You're right. I did all those things. I was wrong. I shouldn't have did those things. Yes, I'm a bad husband. But what about now? What have I been doing now?" Because now it's been like 3 months, 6 months, a year that I've been polite and kind and friendly and respectful to her. And I was like, "What about now? Am I that way now?" And she's like, "No, you don't do that anymore." I was like, "Okay, thank you." And I would why her and I'd walk away. So it took about a year and a half of me flushing out this garden hose, that I had to experience all that bitterness and harshness and hostility coming at me because that's what I put out. So I had to experience that coming back to me. There was no way for me to run and hide from that, right? And I was committed to this relationship and I was really interested in seeing it work. So I chose to stay in the relationship, and I knew that this hostility was impermanent. It was only a matter of time before she had exhausted her own craving, anger, and ignorance in her mind. And I just needed to kind of walk through that. And she was patient with me for 11 years while I was doing those kinds of things. So I was like, you know what? I can be patient. I don't know how long this is going to last, but I'm going to make my way through this, right? And after a year and a half, it was all extinguished. So we've been together now for about 17, 18 years, but we've been happily together for about 6 years, 7 years, right? So we've gotten to the point where we don't argue. We're not upset with each other. We're not frustrated with each other. We just have discussions. We still disagree with each other sometimes. But in the past, when we had a disagreement, it was a fight to death because I was trying to convince her that my way was the right way, and she was trying to convince me that her way was the right way. You guys have probably been in those kind of conversations too, right? But now we don't do that anymore because we understand impermanence. Of course, she has a different opinion than me. Of course, I have a different opinion than her, and we don't have to agree. It's okay. We don't have to agree. So we just sit down and talk now. And at the end of the conversation, sometimes I now agree with her. Sometimes she agrees with me. Sometimes we walk away from the conversation and we still disagree, and we just choose to do it different ways. Where before it was like a fight to death. So when you start getting rid of your craving, your anger, your ignorance, when you understand impermanence, you don't have to be in a conversation where you fight to death to try to convince the other person your way's the right way. Just get rid of that. Of course, they think differently than you. They're not going to think the same way as you, and that's okay, right? So you can disagree with someone, and that doesn't mean you're being disrespectful. Sometimes when we get married or we're in a life partnership, we think we have to agree on every single decision. This isn't true. You're not going to agree with your life partner on every single decision because that is impermanence. So when we disagree on a decision, we just talk about it. And sometimes one of us changes our mind. In other cases, we don't change our mind. We still think the way we think, and we just go off into the world and we make those decisions in our own way. And then we can both be comfortable with that. So I had to extinguish all that unwholesome karma, but because of doing that work now, I would never do anything to damage this relationship. And she would never do anything to damage this relationship either, because we've had nothing but 6, 7 years of nothing but peace and joy in our relationship, right? And you can get to this same place too in all of your relationships, because it's not just my wife that it's like that with. It's with my son, it's with my grandmother, with my sister, with every single person in our family. There's no one who's bitter and harsh and hostile with me in our family. I've extinguished all that unwholesome karma through changing my own mind. I didn't change them. They chose to change on their own. I changed my mind, and they could see like, wow, he's not bitter and harsh with us anymore. And now they started to be loving and kind, just like I'm loving and kind. But it took many months and many years for that transition to occur. So you're going to need to be patient with yourself, because This garden hose analogy that I'm talking about, where you've been putting mud into your garden hose and now you're hooking it up to the water and flushing that out. Well, right now you still have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. So even though you're hooking up the garden hose to the faucet and starting to put clean water through it, you're still putting some mud into your garden hose. So it's going to be a while. If you could snap your fingers today and practice the teachings of the Buddha perfectly, which you can't do, you still have mud in your garden hose that you got to clean out, right? So as you're cleaning this garden hose out, because your mind still has craving, anger, and ignorance, you're going to still be putting mud in your garden hose. But you're going to work on minimizing that through training your mind with the Eightfold Path. That's what's going to help you to minimize the amount of mud that you're putting in the garden hose. But eventually your practice is going to get up and running so strong that you're going to stop putting mud in your garden hose. And then from that period forward, you're going to have multiple years of flushing out your garden hose and getting it completely clean. So it's going to take you 6 months, a year, maybe 2 years to get up and running with the Eightfold Path, to do that well in every single situation. And then from that point forward, you'll be flushing out your garden hose and eventually getting to the point where you don't have any unwholesome kamma. The only things that are coming back to you are wholesome kamma, or wholesome results. But no matter how enlightened you are, there's 5 things that you can't obtain. It's called the unobtainable. There's 5 things. You can't obtain permanent youthfulness. You can't obtain permanent health. You can't obtain permanent life. You're going to experience loss, and you're going to experience destruction of your material possessions. You can't obtain this, no matter who you are, no matter how enlightened you are. So when we talk about your only experience wholesome kamma, it doesn't mean that everything's going to go your way in your life. Sometimes that's what people hear when I say that you're only going to be experiencing wholesome kamma. They're like, oh, everyone's going to do things my way. No, that's not what it is. You still live in an impermanent world. So you'll still experience old age. You're still going to experience sickness. You're still going to experience death. You're still going to experience loss, right? You might lose your money. You might lose your material possessions. You're still going to experience destruction, right? Like a tree could fall on your house, right? Because of impermanence. Right? So it doesn't mean that nothing's ever going to happen to you. So like when I got in a motorbike accident about 2 months ago, people are like, isn't that unwholesome kamma that you experienced this? I was like, no, that's sickness, right? In this situation, I knew the decisions that I made, that it didn't lead to my unwholesome kamma. Now, someone could get it in a motorbike accident that is unwholesome kamma based on unwise decisions, but every time you get sick or ill or you have loss or destruction, it doesn't mean that it's necessarily unwholesome kamma. So these are the 5 things that are unobtainable. You will still experience old age, sickness, death, loss, and destruction. You can't escape that no matter how enlightened you are, because all those things are based in impermanence. And even though you're enlightened, you're still subject to impermanence. It's just that your mind isn't affected by it anymore, right? So like when I got in a motorbike accident, I was polite, kind, friendly, and respectful to the ambulance people, to the police officer, to my wife, to the nurses, to the doctors. You know, I didn't experience any fear, anything like that. So you can get to the point where you extinguish your discontentedness, but you still will experience these 5 things, okay? But you can get to the point where you're only experiencing wholesome kamma coming back to you. Do you guys have any questions on how to extinguish your unwholesome kamma? Yes, ma'am. Could you use a microphone here in the white bowl? You just need to press the gray button. We have people online. That's why I'm asking you to use a microphone. It's not just for us, because I can hear you perfectly.
Thank you. My question is, if we clean all the kamma, we will gonna be no fears. Is that right?
Yes, when you eliminate your craving, which is the longing, yearning in the mind, you won't have any fear in your mind whatsoever, as well as anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, loneliness, boredom, shyness, resentment, jealousy. All of that is eliminated, and it's all being caused by the same thing, which is craving, desire, attachment, the longing, the yearning, the wants, and the expectations. So if I craved for this body to be permanently healthy, when I got in a motorbike accident, I would be fearful. right? I would have fear that, oh my goodness, this body's not healthy. I'm going to die. And maybe someone's afraid of death, right? Because they're holding on to life. So if you crave permanent life, when you get close to death, you will have fear. But when you get rid of that craving and wanting things to be permanent, you can extinguish your fear and all those other discontent feelings as well.
Yeah, so which means as if I have fears, I have feelings, whatever it is, good or bad, that means I have karma.
If you're experiencing discontent feelings, you're still having unwholesome Gotama. That's part of your unwholesome Gotama. Because you haven't trained your mind, you still have craving, anger, and ignorance in your mind. This is something we talked about yesterday. You still have craving, anger, and ignorance, and now that is going to produce discontentedness in your mind. But the more you eliminate your craving, anger, and ignorance, the more or the less discontentedness that you'll have. You'll experience less and less stress and anxiety and all those other feelings, eventually completely extinguishing it 100%.
Yeah. So the purpose of us come to the earth is to clean our karma.
Clean up your mind, and by cleaning up your mind, you will then be able to clean up your Kamma.
Yeah. Okay.
So training your mind is what the Buddha taught you. And Kamma isn't anything mystical or magical. You missed the first part of this talk where it's just cause and effect or action and result. It's the results of your decisions. So when you make a decision, either wisely or unwisely, you're going to experience either wholesome or unwholesome Kamma. This is the results of your decisions.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Yes, sir.
I can save this for the afternoon if it's more appropriate. But is enlightenment permanent?
Yes. Once you get to the enlightened mental state, it's a permanent mental state because now your mind is unconditioned. Conditioned objects, they will arise, they will change, and then they will fade away because they're conditional. But when you have an unconditioned object, it doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. So enlightenment, or actually unenlightened mind, has certain conditions in the mind that are producing these discontent feelings to arise, change, and fade away. Those conditions are craving, anger, and ignorance. Those are the conditions that are causing the mind to experience the arising of pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. But when you purify the mind and you get those causes and conditions out of the way, now the mind can function in this unconditioned mental quality where there's no condition that needs to be met in order for your mind to experience those qualities. So it's just always experiencing that mental state. Have some more questions coming in.
The 5 unattainable things triggered my thinking about impermanence. So if youth is impermanent, then aging is permanent, is it?
So aging is not permanent because eventually this being is going to die, and now the being is not going to age any longer.
If
impermanence is permanent. That's one of the jokes in Thai or in Buddhism. So these natural laws and enlightenment itself is permanent. But aging is not permanent because this being is not permanent. So it's not going to permanently age.
So death is not permanent?
Death is not permanent either because there's rebirth.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah. All right. So now I'll share one more thing on this topic and then we'll take our little mid-morning break. Is sometimes when I teach that you can't run and hide from your Kamma, and I help you guys to be able to see that, people say, hold on a second, David, what about that person who their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, their bloody murder weapon was under their bed, they had blood all over their car, they went to court and they were found not guilty in the court of law, Didn't they escape their karma? Didn't they run and hide from it? And the answer is no, they haven't run and hid from their karma. What we're seeing in the laws of society is we're seeing human laws. The natural law of Kamma is a perfect law that's functioning at all times. It's unbiased. It's the most unbiased teacher that you will ever find. But the results of the natural law of Kamma, you may or may not be there to see when that person is experiencing those results. When you go away to the court of law, that's not 100% of your karma. That's just a human law. And because humans are imperfect and they have craving, anger, and ignorance in their mind, they're not going to be able to create, administer, and enforce laws equally amongst everybody. We should always aspire to get that better and better, of course, but understanding human beings and craving, anger, and ignorance in the mind, we're going to sometimes make mistakes. There's people who are guilty that are found not guilty, and there's people that are not guilty that are actually found guilty, and that's because the human laws are imperfect. But that person can't escape their karma. They're going to be experiencing their karma. So this individual who they went to court and were found not guilty, but their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, blood was all over their car, they still experienced their karma. You just might not have been there when they were experiencing it, because here's the types of things that they would experience as a consequence of having murdered an individual. They would experience a bad reputation in the community, right? Because people are hearing about this murder and this is spreading around the community. They're going to experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, and a shortened lifespan. The way that this happens is through the mind. That if the mind has enough craving, anger, and ignorance to go out into the world and kill somebody, then that means there's a significant amount of stress and anxiety in the mind. There's a lot of discontentedness in the mind, and that's putting stress on the physical organs of the body, like the heart and the lungs and the things like this. So this individual can experience sickness, disease, physical and mental pain, and a shortened lifespan as a result of having gone out in the world and killed. Also, they're going to be experiencing hostility, aggression, fights, and can even be killed themselves. Because if they had enough anger and hostility and to go out and kill another human being, do you think the rest of their relationships are going perfectly for them? No, right? They're having difficulties with their friends, their family, their coworkers, people like this. They're going to have all kinds of difficulties in other relationships. So they're experiencing hostility and bitterness and harshness, and can even be killed themselves as a result of some of these relationships that they have. They can experience a loss of income and wealth, because to go away to a court of law and defend yourself on a murder charge is very expensive. Very, very, very expensive. So you're going to lose a certain amount of income and wealth having to go off and do that. They're going to have difficulties in their relationships. As I mentioned, it's not like they killed somebody and all the rest of their relationships are going perfectly. They're going to have difficulties in other parts of their life as well, in other relationships that they're having. They're going to have difficulty securing and progressing in employment, right? People aren't going to be interested in hiring this person for a job. Would you hire a murderer for your company, right? Probably not, right? Would you have someone live with you? Because they're going to have difficulty securing housing. Would you like to have a roommate living in your home that you know was charged with this murder charge, and you know their bloody footprint was at the murder scene, the bloody murder weapon was under their bed, and so forth and so on? Probably not. So they're going to have a hard time securing housing. They're also going to have a hard time acquiring the basic necessities to sustain their life, like food, clothing, shelter, and medical care, right? So this is all the result of the natural law of Kamma. And you may not be there when these things are occurring. And then discontentedness and rebirth itself, that is the natural law of Kamma too. Oftentimes when people kill, they walk around with fear and guilt and shame for a very long time in their life. This is the results of their decisions. And then rebirth as well in a particular realm. So people can't run and hide from their karma. You just might not be there to see it when they're actually experiencing their karma. So when you see somebody on the news that you just have overwhelming thoughts that this person must be guilty and they're found not guilty, just remind yourself that a court of law is imperfect because it's a human law and it can't be administered fairly with everybody. Or if there's someone who you think is not guilty and they're found guilty, just remember that the court of law is not perfect, right? But let's just say, for example, like I grew up in a gang and for the first 25 years of my life, I was in the street gang, and I was out there selling drugs, and I was murdering and killing and stuff like this. But then at the age of 25, I got away from the gang, right? I never got caught for any of those things. But at the age of 25, I got away from the gang. But now at the age of 26, 27, there was some murder that the gang did, and now the police wrap me into it somehow, right? People kind of wrap me into this murder, even though I didn't participate in it, right? But now I go to court and I'm found guilty, even though I didn't do it. Well, this is my karma, because all those situations where I didn't get caught, now this one that I didn't do, I'm actually getting caught for it, and now I'm going away to jail. So the natural law of karma is always functioning at all times. It's the most unbiased teacher that you will ever find. It's going to show you day by day what are the wholesome things and wise decisions that you're making, because you're going to experience wholesome results, and what are the unwholesome things, what are the unwise decisions that you're making. Because whenever you're experiencing an unwholesome result coming back to you, you need to look at it and say, what were the decisions that I made that led to this particular outcome? Because what we tend to do in the unenlightened state is we look at everybody else. We want to see everybody else's problem and see how wrong they are, right? Well, if you're involved in a certain situation and it didn't go well, let's just say the other person was 99% in the wrong, so to speak. And let's just say there was only 1% where you made mistakes and you made unwise decisions. Well, if you focus on their 99%, it's not going to help you at all. Focus on your 1%. What was your 1% of this issue? What was your 5%? What was your 10%? What was your 20 or 30 or 50%? Look at that and cultivate wisdom, and now next time make better decisions. If you focus on what everyone else is doing around you that is unwise, you're not going to be able to improve your decision making. So you need to look at what's unwise and what's going on in the decision making that you're making, so that now you can improve it next time and you won't experience those same results. And that's how you improve, getting better and better and learning about this natural law. And where you need help, you can reach out to me. Sometimes students contact me and they say, hey, David, this thing is happening in my life and I have no idea the decisions that I made that led to this. Can you help me? Right? Or, hey, David, this thing is happening. Here's the decisions that I made that I think contributed to this, but can you help me to see this? Right? Because this is one of the best ways to be able to learn the natural law of Kamma is through your own direct experiences. We can sit here and talk hypothetically all day long, but when you're actually experiencing something, that's where you'll cultivate the most wisdom. So the natural law of Kamma is functioning at all times. It's unbiased. These laws of society, they're imperfect because they're administered by human beings. Okay? So I'm going to stop here. It's almost, let's see, it's only 10:20, or is that 10:30? No, 10:20, about 10:20. So let's take a 20-minute break. And when we come back, I'm going to teach you guys what is merit. This is a unique type of wholesome karma that you'll need to learn how to generate. And then we're going to talk about continued support on the path to enlightenment. So let's come back at 10:40 and we'll pick this topic up. Okay? Thank you guys for your questions.